Hey friends, Scott here. Today I want to talk about the 4 personalities of record label owners. We could also look at this as calling it maybe the 4 different types of record labels that you might want to start. We're going to talk about the passion project. We're going to talk about the entrepreneur. We're going to talk about the artist, and we're going to talk about the philanthropist. And we're going to find out which type of record label that you want to start or which type of record label that you have today. You can get the notes from today's show by going to otherrecordlabels.com/4types, the number 4 and the word types, otherrecordlabels.com/4types. Okay, why are we doing this? Why is this important? I think it's good to acknowledge our motivations as a record label. There's good evidence to prove that if we understand our why, it'll put us in a better position to figure out our how. So maybe there's more than 4, but I've thought about it and I've narrowed it down to these 4 different types of record labels or 4 different types of record label owners. Each of these personalities bring a different type of skill or a different type of mission statement or different goals and objectives that really inform how we operate and the type of music we release and the people we work with and the fans that we attract. Okay, so number 1 is the passion project. Let's talk about this. So this would be, I often think about like people who are rich or retired, and that would be like, but that's not always the case, but it's people who are starting a record label because they're passionate about music. They're passionate about maybe even a certain type of music, like a genre, or even formats. Maybe they're passionate about vinyl or reissuing jazz records from Jamaica on vinyl. I don't know. Oftentimes, these people may even have a full-time job that's in a completely unrelated field, and they use their record label to find fulfillment. They may have business experience in some areas, or they may not have business experience, but everything is fueled by passion, and everything is fueled by their desire to do right by the artist or to do right by the style of music or whatever. The pros of this type of record label is that they're not necessarily guided by money. And so they're able to really invest in the projects and to make some really bold packaging decisions or signing kind of weird music or interesting artists because they're not trying to conform to mainstream or what they think will sell. In fact, a lot of them actually just go into a project knowing they're going to lose money and they're okay with that because the reward comes somewhere else. Now, the cons of running a label like this is that you run the risk of doing a disservice to your artist because most of your artists will maybe not be in the same position as you. See, let's say that you have a job and an alternative income. Well, not all artists actually have a day job or they don't want to have a day job or they don't have an alternative source of income or they don't have a fallback plan. And so you might be willing to totally take a risk and not put in the same amount of effort as, let's say, an entrepreneur because it's just a passion project for you, whereas the artist may have different goals. And so it's really important if this is you, if this is the type of record label that you want to start or that you currently have, you really need to think about the artist in this equation. Think about their expectations and what are their goals and how can we meet those goals? So yes, it's fulfilling for you, but we have to make sure it's also fulfilling for the artist. It's a beautiful relationship, though. It's a beautiful model. I'm a big fan of this type of model. I could see me doing something like this, just being so passionate about a certain type of music or so passionate about, graphic design or album covers or vinyl or something that I want to, do a label in this area. So I really do think that the passion can drive a lot. Remember, the point of today's episode is whatever one of these or half of one of these and a little bit of another one or all 3 or all 4 of them, whatever you find yourself falling into, the goal is that there's no right or wrong way to do a record label. As long as you're taking care of artists and their art, there are no rules. You can do your record label in your own unique way, and I think that's cool. Number 2 is the entrepreneur. And so that's someone who's really focused on launching this record label as it is a business. They're thinking about revenue, they're thinking about expenses, and most importantly, they're thinking about profit. They're doing this to make money. It's not necessarily a bad thing. In the arts world, it kind of sounds like a bad thing, but there are models where this makes sense. In fact, I've talked to a few record labels that are uniquely positioned. For example, they might work at a manufacturing plant and they have a unique position at making vinyl, and they see an opening in the market where they think that them as a curator could make some money because they have a special discount making records. Or let's say you are a vinyl membership club and you have a mailing list of 50,000 vinyl collectors. Well, you now know if I curate my own music and sign my own releases, I can sell it to this list. Or what if I've met a YouTube channel that has it's a music YouTube channel and they have 500,000 subscribers and they're like, hey, we should release some of our own music instead of just featuring other artists. So entrepreneur labels are often uniquely positioned. They have some sort of technological advantage or distribution advantage or some sort of business mindset that the average label owner doesn't have. And that puts them in a position to find a hole in the market. And I mean, the strong acumen of these individuals can mean that their chances of being sustainable or profitable is a little bit higher than, say, somebody who's just a musician starting a record label. Here's the con of a label like this. The negative side of a label like this is that there's not a lot of room for the artists, right? Where does the artist come into play? If you're thinking about the business as a whole, what role does the artist play in this? And it becomes very easy to kind of forget them or to see them and their art as a commodity. I think of labels as coaches to artists. I think of them as protectors and advocators for artists. Whereas I think of entrepreneurs as all of those things, but for a business. So it's really important that if you find yourself running a record label or starting a record label that is from the heart of an entrepreneur, that you make sure you put a plan in place to protect your artists and to advocate for them. Write it down on a piece of paper, make it a mission statement, make it part of your declaration for your record label, is that these are the things that we're going to do to protect and advocate for our artists. Then you can go ahead and make a bunch of money. Number 3 type of personality for a record label is the artist. And this is basically musicians who start record labels to promote their own music and eventually their peers' music. This is me. This is my story. This is how I got my record label started. We were a driven bunch of artists who just wanted to play music together and play music to the same fan base and just make music together. We shared values and we shared favorite bands. We shared instruments. We shared food. Artist-owned labels tend to be more focused on creative freedom and artistic expression. They may prioritize experimental music or avant-garde music because they're all about the artists and they're all about the music. The record labels are also completely bespoke to the needs and the way of operating of the individual artist. So for me, for my own record label, I like to stay at home. I don't like to tour. And I like to just make music and be prolific and write and record as much as possible. And so my record label is kind of conformed to that. But if you're a digital-only record label and you're just pumping out releases, you may not do physical stuff. You may not go on tour. Maybe you're a vinyl-only record label and you're that type of art. You're the type of artist that relates with vinyl collectors or whatever, you know what I mean? And so the cool thing about an artist-centered or an artist-run record label is that you can kind of design the whole label bespoke to your own preferences. Now, the cons of this type of label is the business side often gets left behind. And I'm guilty of this. When we started our label, we were about music. We were about playing music together, writing music, recording music. We were about community and playing shows. And we didn't invest financially into our record label. We didn't commit as much as we should. We didn't take ourselves seriously. I've talked about this on this channel before. We didn't take ourselves as seriously as we really should have, and it bit us in the butt later on. We were interested in all these things that weren't necessarily or inherently bad, but it was just a situation of the monkeys running the zoo. At the end of the day, we were prone to make business decisions that were best for us and the artists on the label, but not really the business itself. Kind of the opposite problem of an entrepreneur-run label. You see how this is all about balance? Finally, number 4 is the philanthropist. A philanthropist label owner is motivated by a desire to give back to the community and support artists who otherwise wouldn't have access to resources or opportunities. They may be less focused on commercial success and more interested in using their resources to promote social and cultural change. Philanthropic record label owners tend to prioritize marginalized communities and promoting music that raises social awareness or social issues. And ultimately, they oftentimes commit their whole record label to a certain charity or a certain cause, or they become a charity themselves. Now, I want to clarify how this is different from a passion project. I see the passion project as being more of a mission and a fulfillment for the individual label owner, which is cool. Whereas I see a philanthropic record label as being maybe a little bit more guided by an overall cause and basically giving everything towards one sort of cause or mission statement. Not to say that a passion project record label is a selfish label. I think I see a passion project record label as being selfless to the art and the artists, whereas I see a philanthropic record label as being selfless to the cause. You see the difference? The pros of this type of record label is huge. I mean, this is incredible. Obviously, we support certain causes, and we support lifting up artists who have normally been pushed to the background over the years. But there's also kind of financial or marketing benefits to it. The fact that you're actually going to attract a really diehard audience. You may limit yourself from a broad audience, but your diehard audience is going to be a little more narrow, but they're going to be very committed. It also gives something for people to sink their teeth into, that they're supporting music and they're supporting a record label that is in line with their own values. And that's huge. Now, there's a con to this type of record label. Some of these labels fail to provide value to their customers. Every business, even charities, need to trade something with the customer for money. The fact is that people even give to charities or nonprofits with the expectation of something in return. It's often, most cases, not something tangible. It's something that makes them feel good on the inside or lets them know that their money is going towards a cause that is important to them. Of course, we're giving them great music. We hope that that's enough. But the problem I see with these type of charity record labels is they often will establish themselves as a charity, but then they'll operate, or they'll try to operate the same way that a normal record label does. And I think it's important, and I'm not an expert on this. You'll have to talk to record labels who are charities. So this is for my own observations. But I think record labels who operate around a big macro cause or a mission statement or are a nonprofit organization, I feel like it's really important for them to create their own model, to not necessarily copy just the normal independent record label model, and also not necessarily to copy the NGO charitable model, but to define something their own and to figure out what their audience wants in return from a donation. Is it a donation, or are you buying a record? My point is that people trade their donations for something in return. What is it that your customers want in exchange? Do they want that feeling that they know that they are enabling somebody to make great music on a regular basis? That could be enough. It's just important that you're able to put your finger on it and say, this is what we do as an organization. This is not only the people that we help, but what value do we provide to our donors? Okay, so let's wrap this up. Some of you might be thinking, what if I am one or two or three or four of all these? What if I don't find myself being just one? And I would say, gosh, I can kind of dip my toes in maybe a little bit of all of them. That's okay. I think the point of this episode is clarity and intentionality. That's okay if you're a little bit entrepreneurial, and it's okay if you're a little bit of philanthropic organization, as long as you're aware of what you're doing and you can clearly establish your why. Because once we clearly establish the why we're here, then we know the how. Then we know the things we should be doing, and more importantly, the things we shouldn't be doing. Record labels do share a lot of similarities. We share a lot of similar business model operations. The motivations and the personalities of the record label owners can differ. And I think it's important that those motivations and personalities come through to your audience. That's what people are interested in. We can get music from anywhere. It's been fun for me to witness this diverse group of record label owners through this show and through my podcast, in talking with people in email and on our coaching calls. I think this diversity of record labels is really what makes the independent music community so incredible. And I think the new labels that are going to form that break all of these rules and create even a fifth or sixth type of category that I didn't even think of is what's going to make the music industry incredibly exciting in the future. Go to otherrecordlabels.com/4types, where you can get the notes from today's episode, as well as all of our resources for independent record labels, including our Record Label Academy. You should check that out. Go to otherrecordlabels.com. Thanks for watching.